Welcome back, D2 Nation. It's another episode of your favorite podcast, the D2 Nation podcast. And it's a big week. We just got our way to the D2 men's and women's Elite Eight. There are just 16 teams remaining in D2 college basketball. I'm your co-host, Wayne Cavadi, here to talk a little bit about the D2 Elite Eight. And joining me, as always, is my partner in crime, Bethany Bowman. Welcome back, Bethany.
Thanks, Wayne. And yeah, I know it's a busy week with women's and men's Elite Eights getting set this week. We didn't want to bother a guest joining us as, you know, they've got a lot of excitement going on and now a lot of preparation to do for the Elite Eight. I know you wanted to maybe get a baseball guest to come on, but I didn't think that was right. I was like, no, we got to stick this out. We got to stick out the basketball until it is baseball season. Sorry, you'll have to wait a little longer. But yeah, no, I'm just really excited. I think a quick breakdown for everybody of the Elite Eight brackets would be awesome, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts. So if you want to jump right in with the women's bracket, you think we should start there?
Yeah, let's look at the women's bracket because it's definitely an interesting one, right? So obviously I did two bracket predictions on NCAA.com, and when I looked at them, I did the thing about D2 basketball is that you have to look at history because the history doesn't lie, right?
Yeah.
And in the past, as I pointed out, 7 seeds are very successful in the D2 women's basketball tournament. And sure enough, we have 3 7 seeds that are going to be playing in the D2 Elite Eight.
Yeah.
We also know that number 1 seeds are very successful. And sure enough, we have 3 of those as well, right? And one of those number 1 seeds is UNG, North Georgia, and they got the number 1 seed. And it's not a surprise that they're there. They were one of the teams I picked. I got 4 of my 8 teams right on my bracket prediction. So it's not a surprise they're there, but I'm a little surprised that the Nighthawks are number 1. Not a slight to them, but I thought it was going to be Grand Valley State after who Grand Valley State went through to get here. More on them in a second, but you know, like I said, it's not a slight to the Nighthawks. They're a very, very good team. They've won 11 in a row. They've had to beat nationally ranked teams to get here. They're led by 2 of the best players in D2 women's basketball, and Julianne Sutton and Carolyn Martin. So them being a number 1 seed, if they weren't the number 1, I thought they would be number 2. So it's not like I'm like, oh, crazy, but it's definitely been an impressive run for them. But that leads us to Grand Valley State. Like I said, they're back in the Elite Eight for the first time since 2016. They come out, you remember we had Coach Amy Egan from Drury on. They come out of that ridiculous Midwest region that she was talking about. And they're proving you don't want to, when you're journalists like we are, you hate the cliche, right? You don't want to use the cliche, but they are proving defense wins championships, right? They have the best defense in D2 women's basketball. They held Wayne State in the regional. They held Wayne State to 46 points, Drury to 69, and Walsh to 61. This is playoff basketball, and that defense is holding these teams to low scoring points. And the latter 2 teams that I mentioned, Drury and Walsh, they're top 20 teams, right? And they're holding them to season lows. This team is really good, and it's going to be interesting to run. And then, we'll call them the big 3 because we also had Coach Kim Stevens on earlier this year. And that brings us to Glenville State, and they didn't finish undefeated. We joked with her that they had the undefeated. They did lose that 1 game during the season, but they avenged that loss to Charleston this past week. Beating them by 31 points in the regional final and making it to the Elite Eight. It's first time since 2007. When you think about all those offenses we talked about for the Pioneers, you forget that it's the first time since 2007. So I'll take a little break and see what do you think about those big 3 teams there sitting at the top of the at the women's bracket?
Yeah. Well, I guess what sticks out to me most about the entire field of 8, it's like, I don't really see any weak link. And I know you're at the Elite Eight and it's like everybody's good, but normally I feel like there's at least one first round matchup where you're kind of like, okay, like I feel like I would bet my life on this one. These 8 are really, really solid. So that's, I think, just the biggest thing overall about this bracket. I'm obviously gonna throw in my 2 cents about the MIAA team in there, Missouri Western. They are the 7th seed. They're the 7th seed in the Elite Eight. So you mentioned the success of 7 seeds getting there, but they might be the magic team, I guess, now in this field of 8. A funny story about them, they had to beat Hayes to get here, and Hayes was up by 21 in that regional championship game. Hayes has been phenomenal all year. Missouri Western, they haven't been very good in the past, decade. And this year, so to get to the Elite Eight, it's definitely a historic year for them. I don't think a lot of people even around here knew that. And it was kind of like, wait, what? They're good? Like it kind of came out of nowhere. And their coach has done a great job. Candy's awesome. She has really taken that program to new heights. But, I had someone the other day, like I said, they texted me and they were like, wait, Missouri Western's good? And I was like, yeah, and look at this. I'm like, Hayes is beating them by 20. And I said it was right during the point where Hayes had their largest lead. And I was like, look at this, like, yeah, Western is really good. And this is what's so crazy about the fact that Hayes is up on them so big. And they just fought back. Missouri Western never let go. They have Jalen Haggard, a former Northwest Missouri State Bearcat, that transferred for her last year to Missouri Western. That's her hometown. So she didn't go far to play for the Bearcats, Maryville and St. Joe being about 30 minutes apart, not even, probably like 20. And she comes back for her senior year. She's been a huge spark for them. I just think that, like, again, besides Missouri Western and besides me always throwing in my MIAA, call it expertise or bias, whatever you want to call it, this is just a really loaded field.
And they stopped Southwest Oklahoma State. They scored, what was it, 111 points? Like, they are playing really, really good basketball right now. And the way they came back, and what they were a 6-win team last year, right? It's like you said, and granted, they did have to replace a ton. I think maybe their whole starting five last year, which was why they were 6-win. But I mean, to do that in just 1 year, that it's like you said, it's crazy. And you want to keep talking a little bit about the depth of the field. We have West Texas A&M at the 6th seed in the Elite Eight, and they were the 1 seed in their, or part of the bracket, right? Like, how crazy is that? And then you have Valdosta State, another one of our 7 seeds here. And just think about the teams that they had to beat to get here. Top 15 Tampa. They took down Lee, who was in and out of the top 25 all season. And then they took down the number 1 team in the country. That was, I believe it was 23 games in a row. They a 23-game winning streak, and they beat them. And they're the 4 seed in this field, right? Like, we're talking, this is deep. That Valdosta State Western Washington game, that 4-5 game, right, to start things off. We have a Valdosta State team that wasn't here. Brace yourself, Bethany. Valdosta State's last appearance was 1984. Okay. I wrote this down so I knew. Prince's was number 1 on the Billboard charts with When the Doves Cried. Beverly Hills Cop was the number 1 movie, and Dynasty was the number 1 TV show. Do you know what those things are? Because you weren't born yet.
I definitely know Prince, but Dynasty, not too sure. What was that second thing you said?
Beverly Hills Cop was the top movie.
Heard of it, not real familiar with it.
Eddie Murphy, a good one.
That was 1990. What year?
1984.
1984. Yeah, no, that was 10 years before my time. So and I think for Western, 85 too. 85. It was either 85 or 95.
Missouri Western. Yeah.
Last time. Yeah, I tweeted it out yesterday, but just can't quite remember if it was the 8 or the 9. But yeah, no, I mean, it's been 25 plus years for sure. For those 2 teams. So it's crazy. We're seeing a lot of a rise, a lot of emergence here for some of these teams, which is cool to see, because it's not too fun to have the same teams every year. But I mean, there's obviously the ones that kind of stick around, but there's been some new people, some new teams in, which has been fun.
And that's kind of the COVID effect, right? And we've talked about it a lot. When you have all this experience that's been hanging around because of the extra years of eligibility, and it's leveled the playing field. It's coast to coast, you have a lot more solid teams. It's not, and for a long time, I don't want to say a long time, but it was the same teams over and over and over and over again. You could pencil in at least the 16 contenders you knew that were going to be playing it kind of in the third round to get to the Elite Eight. And it wasn't like that this year, and again, I bring up Western Washington, the number 5 seed. They're a familiar face. They've been here a few times in recent years, and that, like I said, that Valdosta State, they're both stingy on defense. That game's going to be crazy to start things off. It could be like a 41-40 game, the way those 2 teams play defense. But yeah, it's crazy. And, and we didn't even mention pace. Here's another team that's not, it's been a decade since they've been in the tournament, so they're not. And they were in my article that I was telling you when I talk about the 7 seeds. They were kind of, I said pencil them in because they're from that East region, and there's never any continuity in that East region. There's always a wild card that comes out of there. And I said Pace is going to be it. And sure enough, here's Pace, and they got to take on the number 1 seed. They worked it so hard to get here, and they beat some really good teams to get here. And now they got to go against number 1 North Georgia. And I still think, even though they're going against such a tournament tested team in North Georgia, that's always on the cusp of the Elite Eight, if they're not here, I still think it's going to be a crazy ball game, right? It's just, that's the way it is right now. I mean, and it's like you said, that's what makes it fun. So let me ask you something.
Okay.
Who are the semifinal teams?
Oh, like I said, it's tough. So I hate when you do this. I honestly hate. We did this with football with the 2 guys, the NCAA guys, and none of us were even close.
Not even close.
But that's okay. Okay, I'll go ahead. I'm looking at the bracket right now. I'm gonna go Valdosta over Western Wash. I'm gonna go Glenville over West Texas A&M. I'll go North Georgia. I'll pick the 1 seed. The one that's getting me is the Grand Valley State in the Western. You know who I want to pick.
I know.
But I have a ton of respect for Grand Valley State too. Not only in women's basketball, but just everything. Like, I feel like they have such a good culture of because a lot of times sports feed off of each other, and it's so that's a tough one to pick against. I'll go Grand Valley State just because, like I said, I do respect them. I don't, much as I want to just pick MIAA teams. I know it's not everybody. And just in the MIAA, that's good. So we'll go Grand Valley State. So there's my 4: Grand Valley State, North Georgia, Valdosta, and Glenville. So I'm really not picking any upsets, which I kind of feel bad about, but that's okay.
But I agree with you on all but one. I think UNG advances. I think Grand Valley State advances. I think Glenville State advances. But I do think Western Washington is the team that wins that game against Valdosta State. And like I said, I think it's going to be a tough battle. And I think it's going to be a close one. Yeah. But this time of year, that's going to, if it cuts down to a Grand Valley State and Glenville State matchup, right? If we see that at any point over the next 2 rounds, it's going to be offense versus defense to the fullest. And, the Grand Valley State's defense can definitely slow down Glenville State. There's no doubt in my mind. The question is, when we talked to Coach Stevens, they play both sides of the court. They're very good defensively, and people forget that when they see that they score 100 points a game. So the question isn't, can Grand Valley State stop Glenville State? Because we know they can. The question is can they keep up offensively? Even slowing down Glenville State means they're going to score 75 points. That's slowing them down, right? So the question is can they keep up offensively? And I think those final 4 teams, North Georgia, Grand Valley State, Glenville State, which we agree on, and whether it's Valdosta State or Western Washington, they all match up so perfectly, no matter how you cut it, between defense and offense minded, that it's going to make for really, really good matchups. Do you want to pick a champion?
Yeah, we have to. I'm gonna let's see. I'll go with Grand Valley State. Yeah,
I think I'm with you.
Okay.
The way they play defense in that, we talked about it, and I already said that we talked about it with a coach in that region, where it's not just me and you sitting here from an observer standpoint. We talked with a coach in the heart of that region, talking about how difficult it was. And Grand Valley State came out of there and beat some of those teams that make it so tough. There weren't upsets that they had to beat the 8 seed or the 7 seed, right? They went head to head, toe to toe with the heavyweights, and they came out. They are one of the heavyweights. I'm not, obviously. And they came out ahead, I'll say it again, defense wins championships. And right now they got the momentum, they got that defense. And I think I agree with you on that pick. I think Grand Valley State looks really good.
Good. Well, we didn't talk about this at all prior, so that makes me feel good. If I said it first and then you agreed, because you are the dean of D2. So awesome. Great recap of the women's Elite Eight, but now let's move on to the men. Really exciting matchups here too. I'm super excited about this tournament. What do you think? What do you think? I mean, just overall initial thoughts for you, Wayne.
So let's go back to again, with the bracket prediction article that I did. Throw my predictions out the window because they weren't good. I think I got 4 again. I mean, I don't think that's good. But again, when I look at making these predictions, I look at the history. And the history says for the past, since they went to the Elite Eight format and 64 team bracket, which is well over 10 years, there's an average of 4 number 1 seeds in the Elite Eight. Guess how many number 1 seeds we have in the Elite Eight? 4, right? So when I say these things at history, the unfortunate part for me as the expert is I picked the wrong 4 1 seeds to advance, but I was right that 4 number 1 seeds were going to advance. And that's when you're picking these brackets, you know, when you look at these bracketologists for D1 and March Madness on the upper level, there's all these stats and everything, but you have to pay attention to history when it comes to D2 because it does repeat itself. And we have the 4 number 1 seeds. And the other thing I said is in that article is if you're a Cinderella fan, D2 men's basketball isn't for you, right? 5, 6, 7, and 8 seeds, they don't make it to the Elite Eight. And again, I'm not insulting them. They just don't get there. What do we have this year? We have 4 number 1s and 4 number 3s making up the D2 Elite Eight. It is your top teams that get here, you know, and that doesn't mean the top teams in the regions don't change year to year. You know, for example, we have a Black Hills State this year who is having a record-setting season for themselves, but they were still the number 3 seed in their region, right? So those teams change up a little bit, but when it comes down to the D2 Elite Eight, we have powerhouse teams there. That's what we have. And you know, we had 2 of the stars from the powerhouse that's in the D2 Elite Eight right now, and we had Nick Smith and Sekou Silla, and we didn't have RJ Sunahara, but he's just as much a superstar. And same with Eddie, and Nova Southeastern is 31-0, and you have to think that puts them as the favorite. But you look at this field, and again, just like you said for the women's, it is stacked. And we'll turn to you before we get into any other team. Northwest Missouri State is the 5 seed. So what do you think about seeing the Bearcats as again, you know, we joked about it last week with Coach and Diego on the show. 5 losses in Maryville makes it seem like it was a failure of a season for these guys. Now they're a 5 seed in the D2 Elite Eight. I can only imagine what the fans in Maryville are thinking, that, oh my God, I can't believe it's a 5 seed. But I mean, you look at the top 4, it's stacked.
Yeah, don't even let me get going on this because you're right. I mean, it's just crazy. A Northwest Missouri State team, especially this one, like, I mean, I know a lot of people thought that losing Ryan Hawkins would weaken them, and can I sit here and say that it didn't? No. I mean, they were better with Hawk, and because, I mean, look what Hawk's doing. He's just that type of player. Not only is he a great player, but he's one of those players that just makes whatever team he's on better, and that's just the facts. But I will say I've been so impressed with how this team has proven themselves as, you know, not just a team that's good with Ryan Hawkins. I mean, they've got Trevor Hudgens, probably if it's not Hawk, it's him that would go and make an impact anywhere at the D1 level. But Diego, like you said, we had him last week. So good. Wes Dreamer, so good. Luke Waters, I mean, he's like the role guy. He's a guy from Kansas. He's Kansas City area, but the Kansas side, he's from like an hour away from where I grew up. But I mean, he is good. Like Luke, I mean, all these guys, like these 4th, 5th guys, Isaiah, I mean, they're so solid. So to have them as a 5 seed, it's just kind of almost like unfair to me. I'm like, I don't want to be a 4 seed playing Northwest. And I honestly, as much as I think that you're right, Nova Southeastern deserves the favorite or the number 1 team, or excuse me, number 1 seed, I don't want to play Northwest Missouri State in the semis if I'm Nova. Like, I just don't. So that's going to be a really interesting matchup, I think. Northwest Missouri State is my favorite because not only do I think they're just really solid, like you said, history repeats itself. They've been there. They've won so many. I think that's going to be a huge advantage for them. But yeah, I think that semifinal matchup potentially between Nova and Northwest is really kind of like the championship game. Saw that just this past weekend. Had some of my state championship games at the high school level here in Kansas, a team that played a lot of tough teams in the regular season and had some losses that earned them the 4 seed. Well, they ended up in the semis playing the 1 seed, 4 seed won. And everybody said, I mean, that was like the championship game. And it does kind of, it's too bad that it can't be seeded perfectly to where we get the 2 best teams at the end. But I think that could potentially be a similar situation. And then the last thing I'll say is like, everybody listening is probably like, why this is not the D2 podcast, this is the MIAA podcast, but bear with me, like that's the basketball that I've seen a ton of, so I'm going to talk more about it. Washburn went in as the 7th seed at the Central Region, beat Minnesota Duluth as a 2 seed. We had Coach Wick on this season. I thought Minnesota Duluth was really good. It wasn't a discredit to him, but I just thought going into it that Washburn was going to come out because I knew how tough the MIAA was this year. Washburn then had to play Northwest in the
like they do, because that's what happens, and that's what happens in March is Washburn and Northwest.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to happen, and obviously Northwest comes out of that one, but Washburn could very well be a team at the Elite Eight. So that's my thoughts. I don't think that's any news to anybody, but again, just to recap, Northwest is a 5 seed, probably the scariest 5 seed you could ever have in any
ever. I mean, you have the 2-time defending champs. If 2020 finished, you could be talking about the fact that you have the 3-time defending champs. And here's the thing, we've had both Trevor and Diego on this show, and they are the 2 most humble kids you'll ever meet. They don't have they don't do the swagger. They have that. They're cool. They're calm. They're collected. Granted, Diego throws down a dunk. There's a little fire there, but he is not a trash talker. They're good, humble kids. But if you are going to tell me in the back of their minds, the 2 of them, that they're not sitting there going, we could win this championship and close out our run, whatever happens next year, who knows what's going to happen next year, but we could close out our 4-year run, winning the championship every year isn't in the back of those 2 mind, so they're now you're fueling the fire in Diego Bernard and Trevor Hudgens. And what we're looking at right there is arguably the best backcourt in the history of D2 men's basketball with what they've done. You look at the stats, you look at the run, you look at the number, you could point to Joey Wittes, you could point to Ryan Hawkins. They have had key pieces, but they have been 2 of the most important of those pieces the whole time. And they have an opportunity. I already think they may be in the conversation, but if they win this, they cement this run is the greatest run in the history of D2 men's basketball history, and they'll be the centerpiece of it for all 4 of those big wins. But that brings us back to Nova, and Nova Southeastern, their last 2 games, they were tight, right? And what we've seen in the Elite Eight before, and in the tournament in general, but in the Elite Eight, when these high power offenses, you look at West Liberty last year, face off against Northwest Missouri State, they struggle. They struggle a lot because Northwest Missouri State attacks the press, they attack the zone, they attack everything very, very well, and they could break it and they could force you to play their tempo. And if Nova gets in that half court battle with Northwest, that's when we'll see what they get taken away. But that being said, as we've seen Nova Southeastern win in ways that they're not necessarily used to the last 2 nights, right? Or last 2 games, I should say. They weren't back-to-back nights. The last 2 games in the South region, and they prevailed, and they were nail biters both times. But like I said, here they are 31 and up. So I think those are the 2 teams you're watching to move on in the first round. But let's not shy away from everyone else. I think a really interesting matchup that we got to watch is IUP, Indiana, and Hillsdale. Okay. IUP is kind of a tournament heavyweight, right? They're always in the tournament. They've been to the Elite Eight enough times. Hillsdale is the first ever Elite Eight game in the program, in the history of the program. So you have these 2 contrasting programs from that aspect, but on the same sense, you have 2 very good defenses and 2 D2 superstars in Armani Foster on IUP and Patrick Cartier on Hillsdale. And this time of year, they always say one guy doesn't win a game, but this time of year is the time of year where one guy can win a game, right? It is that big play of your superstar player. So to see these 2, Bevo Francis guys year in and year out. Their names are always on the list at the beginning of the season. To see these guys in this first round matchup, that's going to be definitely interesting. And then, Nova Southeastern, I'm sorry, Black Hill State has the unfortunate draw. They're making their first trip ever to go against the 31-0 team, but they have one of these guys in Joel Scott. We've talked about him before. He's a double machine. I believe if I read correctly, he set the program record for scoring in the victory to get here over Colorado Mesa. I mean, we're just talking about a D2 superstar, and he's RJ Sunahara is he makes it look very easy to play defense the way he does, but he's going to definitely have his hands full this time. And if he gets taken out of the game, Nova has the advantage of having that Sekou Silla guy there.
He's not that good. Don't worry.
Yeah.
No, you saw last night. RJ's just so long, but
he's so
I'm not going to bash on any officials, but I did get to watch a little bit of that game, and I think that Nova's used to playing a little bit tough. They've got the guys to play some bully ball, but a couple quick, questionable, maybe a little bit of weak, touchy fouls, and RJ then had to go to the bench. So they can't let that happen. I think that Nova, they've got the pieces and they've got the talent. They've got to play smart.
Yep.
And you and I were texting during that game last night, kind of play-by-play commentary for us, as that was a really great finish. But you said they got to be smart. They got to take good shots, and that's exactly right, because they have the capabilities to knock down really tough shots, but they got to make sure they're good ones.
Mm-hmm. And defense is always tighten up this. You get this far, you're playing your best defense of the year, and you've seen so many different types of offenses that defenses are ready for anything that's thrown at you. In Nova Southeastern's case, in Northwest Missouri's case, their offenses are just so good that even at your best, I saw it in 2019. We'll talk about Northwest Missouri State real quick. Mercyhurst played probably the perfect defensive game, and they took Northwest Missouri State to the wire 55-51, but Northwest Missouri State still won, right? And that's the thing about those type of teams this time of year. But at Bentley, I watched. So I didn't get to see the first half. They have a very tough draw and a 5 seed. That's the Bearcats. But I didn't get to watch the first half. When I turned it on yesterday, the Bentley game against St. Thomas Aquinas, it was the second half. They had just come out of the second half, and Bentley was down by 4. It was 37-33. I didn't see anything of how they got there. Mm-hmm. It was like poetry in motion. Bethany. Bentley was moving the ball. It was beautiful to watch. The ball movement was perfect. And all of a sudden they got aggressive on defense, and they executed perfectly. And in that first 5 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever it was that I was watching, all of a sudden they're up by 11 points. You're talking about a 14-point swing, and they executed perfect basketball. And basketball's a game of runs. St. Thomas Aquinas came back and made it a game, but they pulled away, and they are going to be a handful the way they move the ball, but Northwest is good at getting that, taking that out of your game and disrupting that rhythm. That's what they've shown they're really good at. And let's not forget about Augusta and Chico State. That's going to be a very interesting matchup. Chico State hasn't been here in a while, but they are kind of, D2 Elite 8 veterans. They've been here. This is their third time in 6 or 7 years. That's a good ratio, especially when you consider 2 of the seasons for the CCAA were canceled, right? So they've been here quite a few times. They had a lot of guys. So 2020 got canceled. They were a good team. And as I said, their conference never played last year. They had a lot of these graduate guys come back, stay committed to this program for this opportunity, and now they're here. So throw away the stats on this one, right? You got a lot of extra motivation in this matchup, but then you got Augusta, who could shoot the 3, and that's dangerous this time of year, and Tyshawn Crawford, who's dangerous all year. The guy just swats. He's tough in the middle. He's great defense, and it's going to be a really, really good matchup. And, like I said, just to go back to that IUP Hillsdale, it's going to be they're both stingy on defense, and they have those 2 superstar players. So, we talked about the women's part of the bracket being deep, and it's kind of cliche. Again, I'm whipping out the cliche. Every team's good, but of course every team's good, right? It's the best 8 teams in the nation is what we're looking at here. But I think the matchups, the way the seeds were drawn, the matchups are really intriguing and really good. So
we've got to pick top four, final four, and then champion. So I'll go first because if anybody can't tell, Wayne is the expert here. I should have warned everybody before this podcast. Here's how it's going to go. You're going to hear a lot of Wayne and not so much of me unless it's about Northwest Missouri State and a little bit of Nova because
you're bringing very important information to the table.
I don't know about that, but okay, let me pull this up here. Okay, I'm going to go, you know what? I'm going to go Chico State over Augusta. My first upset of the day. IUP over Hillsdale, Nova over Black Hills, and of course the Bearcats over Bentley.
I think I agree with you. I'm just torn on this IUP Hillsdale game. I really can't figure it out because if you break down their stats and you look at them, they're very, very similar. And it's really right. Honestly, they, the old coin flip, I could take out a coin flip, call heads, and whoever heads is that's my prediction. But because you went with IUP, and I agree with you on everything else, I think I'm just going to agree with you, and we'll have the final four teams be the same.
Okay.
And then it comes down to what we think. Oh man, that's where it gets tough, right? Who's going to be the champion? Because if we are correct, we have Nova and Northwest in the semifinals. Who's going to move on and play for the championship?
Tough. I wish, I really wish there was a way Northwest was a 3 or a 6 because.
Right. So they'd be on the other side and we could see that in the championship game.
But I'm going with Northwest Missouri State. I'm sorry. I cannot. Sorry, Nick Smith and Sekou Silla. Loved you guys. You're a great guest on the show. I hope you're not listening to this, but I got to go Northwest Missouri. But if Nova won, I would not be surprised by any means, if that makes sense.
Absolutely not. And I think I agree with you. And I think it just comes down to, Coach Crutchfield on Nova Southeastern has his team. They're Elite Eight experience now, right? They've been here before. They've done it before. They know how to win. But it just goes back what Northwest Missouri State is doing, what they've shown they could do against even the highest octane of offenses in the past. It seems the obvious pick to pick them, and I think that's what you got to do. So I'm with you on Northwest Missouri State. So who are they playing?
Yeah, they're going to be playing.
That's the tough part, right?
We're playing Chico State.
Let's do it. I'm good with that. And then we're going to
pick what I pick.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna go IUP. But I do like Chico State. I think that's another good matchup because
I like Chico State.
Because Chico State's defense is gritty. They're tough, man. They're tough. So it's definitely a winnable game for both of those teams.
Yeah.
But I think that Northwest Missouri State just caps the greatest 4-year run
I think so.
that we've ever seen, and I count 2020 in there because they were the number one team. I think they had one loss. I can't remember if they were under that. 2020 is just a blur. I try to block what happened. But they were rolling as usual.
I can't remember if they were undefeated or not. I want to say they had a couple losses.
Yeah, I think they did.
Let's just look it up. You know what? We're not going to leave our viewers wondering. Let's just.
I think they had at least one loss.
We've been rambling for a while, but I'm just gonna.
Yeah, they definitely had a loss.
Real quick, I know exactly. Well, I know they won the tournament because I worked that game.
Oh yeah.
It was actually over Southern that year.
Yeah, I remember
it Southern when they were really good under Jeff Boschee, who, by the way, is
Pittsburgh State's
new head coach. Pretty crazy, their rival, but
yeah.
That'll be interesting. So, okay. Pulling up their schedule now. 31-5 this year, and like you mentioned, it's like everybody's like, oh my gosh, it's a failure of a year. Ben McCullum, what are you doing? Okay, so 19-20, 31-1, only loss of the year. Central Missouri, actually. And it was on December 7th, so just kind of a weird loss. But yeah, then they rolled the rest of the year and won a national title. Well, did not win a national title.
Right, there was no.
Probably would have won national title. Won the NIAA championship.
So we have Grand Valley State and Northwest Missouri State as your 2022 national champions, women's and men's respectively. I'm down with that. But of course, as they say, that's why they play the game. So we got to watch out.
Totally wrong.
So remember, D2 sports fans, before we go, remember, we have a nice week off coming up from basketball next week, and that's when we'll get a baseball thing in here. We'll get back to baseball or softball that week. But yeah, you have the week off, and then Monday it goes game day, off day, game day, off day, game day. So it's a 5-day tournament for both men's and women's.
So women start Monday, right?
Monday, and then they're off
Wednesday,
and Friday. And then the men are Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday.
Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Okay, yeah. Confusing.
And you can stream all the games on ncaa.com until the semifinals, which will be on CBS. I probably should have looked that up before we got on this show, but yeah, it's going to be on CBS Sports Network. So we'll have you covered at ncaa.com. There you'll be able to stream the page. We have live updates coming at you. It's going to be great coverage. It's going to be a great 2 tournaments. And Bethany, I know we're both excited to watch, and we'll be texting back and forth. That first day of quarterfinal games is from 12 o'clock to 12 noon to 12 o'clock at night, and it's just a lot of fun basketball to be played.
Yeah, we know who's going to win, but we don't know where to watch. So just trust us. We're your go-to hub for all your info, but we don't know what link you can watch the games at. But
ncaa.com to watch the quarterfinals, and then head over to CBS Sports. I'm telling you, that's the deal.
Okay.
And then we'll crown a champion.
Cool.
And we'll see if we're right. Which,
right.
Trust me, as much as the expert you say I am, I'm not right a lot. So we'll see how it plays out. All right. Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for joining us, D2 Nation. And don't forget, you can give us a follow on Twitter these days to make sure you keep up with our podcast, or you can listen to us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or anywhere else you want to catch a podcast. Thanks for joining us once again. We'll have some guests back for you next week, and we'll see you next week on the D2 Nation.